Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking edition of the Threshold podcast. With me, as always, is Spilly. Spilly, welcome.
Good. It looks like middle of the night there, so good evening and good morning and hello wherever you are.
It's good morning, good afternoon, good night of you. And as you will notice, in great absenteeism is the great Richard Mulholland. So I don't think he'll be joining today for some reason. So we'll be trash talking him for the first 10 minutes of this episode.
Where are you, Rich? In fact, last time we met, he was saying that he was doing a lot of traveling. He was going SA and back and then SA and then Hawaii, or he was going somewhere like he was doing a lot of traveling. So my gut
When is
says
he
he's
not
probably on a.
doing traveling though? When is he not doing that? Like all I ever know is he's like on a plane going somewhere doing a talk.
Yeah, I suppose so. But it used to be South Africa, Europe. Now it sounds like Europe, the rest of the world.
Oh, I see.
Um, anyway,
Yeah.
but no, good for
Well,
him.
that's
Good
what
for
it is,
him.
man.
Hopefully, he's
Um,
flying business class because at our age, you don't really like to be cattle. Hey.
yeah, no, we
Mm.
actually got plans to come back to South Africa in December. I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous episode, but we got quoted $20,000, dude, to fly business class with the wife, me, and the two kids. 20 grand. It's crazy, eh?
Sure. Yeah, in rands, that's a meaningful amount of money. Eh.
Yeah, it is meaningful.
Yeah, yeah, it's
It's
meaningful.
about the price
I,
of
I,
the.
I don't know. I don't know whether it's meaningful in dollar terms, but it sounds like a lot as well.
It's my monthly outgoings. What for a month?
Mm. Mm. Matt, I don't know about you, but I'm not a big Formula One fan, but I've been watching the Drive to Survive series on Netflix religiously over the last 6, 7 years. So I'm almost finished the new one that came out, I think, last weekend, I think it was. Um, it floors me. Still floors me how people live.
Mm,
And there was a comment around if you want to park your yacht in Monaco for the Grand Prix, there's a minimum of like 3 days or 4 days, and it's $70,000 a day just to put the yacht in.
mm,
Like, and I'm like, oh, so it's a 250K 3 day to park the yacht. Like, never mind the cost of the yacht and whatever goes on there, and like, and yet it's full of yachts, right? Like, no problem.
yeah,
You know, the guy who married Jerry Halliwell, Christian Horner, he's
yeah.
the team boss at Red Bull, and there's a scene where he's driving the 1960s or 1970s Series 1 Land Rover, which is like my dream, the convertible with the soft top, through his farm, bouncing around, stops, gets out, gets in the helicopter and pisses off to Silverstone. And I'm just like, dude, like living the dream, eh?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. No, it's
amazing.
interesting. I actually a personal story. So I actually worked on super yachts. So when I was 26, I broke up with my girlfriend at the time. I was living in London, and then moved to Spain. And then someone was like, "Yeah, why don't you go to France?" I'm like, "Why the hell would you do that?" And they're like, "Have you ever heard of super yachts before?" I'm like, "Nope." And then anyway, I learned about the industry. I actually got my first job on a super yacht was in Monaco.
Wow.
And eventually, I built a sort of a network in that micro community there. And I got asked to work in the Ferrari lounge at the Monaco Grand Prix, which is like the Grand Prix in Formula One. And Kimi Raikkonen and Felipe Massa were the two Ferrari drivers at the time. And I was working in the bar, and there were all these Marlboro girls, like they were still punting cigarettes back then. And so Kimi Raikkonen's mother came in, and she was like, "Can I have a vodka?" So I'm like, "What kind of vodka do you want?" And she's like, "Well, what do you have?" So I'm like, I list off the vodkas that were in the VIP lounge, and she's like, "I'm not drinking that crap." So someone had to go run down to like some bar or something, whatever, pick up the special bottle of vodka. So she wound up. I just poured her like triple vodkas while Kimmy was busy racing, and that she got smashed. Dude, it was hilarious. And then we wound up on it was Force India at the time, the Indian billionaire, and we wound up at the party on his yacht, which is a triple deck party, and there were like billionaires, supermodels, all this kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly the life. I actually wrote my first book on the super yacht industry about how to get into it, because it's actually a very, very hard industry to crack. You have to
Mm,
get in to get in, or you have to be in to be in. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's
mm.
very, very hard, and it's very competitive to get into that industry because it's so
Well, I mean,
exclusive.
I'll tell you what I did this weekend, which might be interesting, but it's a similar vein here, right? Is there's two parts. The first part was I went with a relatively new friend who's big in the Porsche community. He's owned many Porsches in his life, and he's looking to upgrade his Porsche currently. Now, what's interesting around this, and I don't know if this is a global thing, it's definitely in the South African environment. So I went with him to the Porsche Center in Sandton. They have like a coffee bar there. You sit around and you have your coffee. And a whole bunch of guys rock up and they, have Saturday morning coffee talking about Porsches and their collection of toys. But then they're also sort of like whining and dining the salespeople. Like, how's it going? How are you doing? And it's like it's very casual and there's no like intention. But when the Porsche staff aren't around, what people are going is they say what my understanding here was that in order for you to get a new Porsche, specifically if you're buying GT2 RSs or GT3s or like the limited edition stuff. In South Africa, you get between 20 and 40 of a range that comes through of like those kind of vehicles, and you have to be invited to buy the vehicle. And the only way you get invited is to basically schmooze the salespeople. Okay. So think of it as a business model where most salespeople are desperate to sell you a product. Here, the consumer's got to be nice and play nice and attend the right events and make sure they know all the history of all the Porsches and understand the intricacies of the Porsches and the performances and be like a proper Porsche head in order to be invited. Part one. Part two, when they invite you, they say to you, cool, we're launching the new version of whatever car it is. Would you want to put your name down? If you put your name down, you've got to put down between 200 and 300,000 Rand interest-free deposit, as far as I understand, for possibly up to 2 years. Okay, while they're manufacturing your vehicle. At that point in time, they also can't tell you how much you're going to pay for that vehicle because interest rates fluctuate, the cost of the vehicles may change, Porsche may decide to charge more or less. So you commit to buying the vehicle and you've got until the vehicle hits the boat to leave the shores of Europe to back out. So in 2 years' time, you can go, I don't want it, I'm out, right? You get your money back. But if you do that, reputationally, you never get invited again to buy another vehicle. So when you commit, you've got to commit. Otherwise, you don't get new Porsches, okay? But I'm going, think about what that means, like as a business model, how wonderful that is. Put it on a deposit on something you don't know what's going to cost. And if you decide to back out the deal, you're never buying another one, right? Like that sort of exclusivity is hugely powerful. Everyone in the table drinking the Kool-Aid, right? They're all in on it. I'm going like, this is peculiar. Like, surely they want to sell more vehicles. Like they want you to buy more vehicles. But the next thing which blew me away is that they've got a basement of all the vehicles that have been written off in South Africa, which are the Porsche vehicles. They don't want those vehicles to be fixed incorrectly and put back on the road because reputation, it could be bad for their brand. And number two, the less vehicles on the road, the better for them in terms of their pricing capabilities. And they use the vehicle spare parts where possible. But they have a deal with all the insurers to buy back all the write-offs. And lastly, when you buy a Porsche, even if you pay cash for it, you're the owner, but on your certification, which is the government NATIS document, the title holder will be Porsche, which means you cannot sell that vehicle without Porsche agreeing to selling it. Why? Because they want to control the market. They will always buy it back from you. But you just can't go and sell. If you buy my brother-in-law just bought a new GT3, they made him sign a 3-year non-sale agreement. He can't sell it back to Porsche, but he can't sell it anywhere else. Now, think about,
legal, though?
Well, like, it's not illegal if you decide to sign the agreement, right? But I mean, it's basically like some kind of, it's monopolistic. It's unbelievable. And my gut says, a lot of the other brands probably do similar things, the Ferraris of the world. But it blows me away in terms of how the guys control these brands and how the guys spend money. And that little club, like, talking about the Monaco club, like it's a club and you can't just get in. You have to be invited in properly. Yeah? It's very interesting to me.
But don't you find that to be the case for any ultra premium brand? And by the way, I think the same principle translates into a slightly different category that maybe isn't like, Ferrari, Porsche, Bentley, that kind of stuff. So yesterday I drove down to Pueblo. It's about an hour and a half south of Denver. to pick up, well, not to pick up, but actually go to look at my finished KTM 500 EXCF build. Spared no expense on this thing, dude. Took a guy a month to build this thing. Like, had all the bells and whistles on it. Anyway, while I was there, I walk into the workshop, and this guy, American guy called Gunny, says, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he's standing in front of a brand new 2025 Kobe 800, right? Which is that Chinese 800
Yeah.
model brand that started with the 450. There's a big stink about it. Anyway, so I said to him, "Dude, how long did you have to wait to get the hold of this bike?" He's like, 13 months. And you had to pay like whatever it was, like 30% down or what have you. But there were only 150, between, I think it was like 135 odd units that were brought into the US at a time. So that you can't buy them, right? You can't buy them. But unlike Porsche, there's no like, you can, like Gunny could sell that bike to me. You know what I mean? Like there's no like controlling the market around that stuff. But it's interesting. The same thing. I put a deposit down on an Aprilia Touareg 650, the rally. Same thing. Had to wait like 8 months to get it, and eventually I binned, I binned it. But there's this very interesting dynamic around supply and demand, isn't
Supply
there?
and demand, yeah. No, but I think what's interesting is that there's a difference between, and I can't speak for like the CF Motors of the world, or the Chinese production, or the Aprilia, but they may have constraints in terms of how much they can produce, right? So it might be, there may be a real constraint around, we can only produce X thousand bikes a year, and then we get to distribute it, and that's what that is. But the Porsche of the world, nothing is stopping them turn that button up, pump a few more cars out, right? Like they could absolutely do that. They obviously don't, because they want the exclusivity and limited supply, because they obviously make better margin, like, supply and demand. But what's also interesting is that, have you ever heard of the term a Veblen good? Veblen goods.
No.
So it's most goods depreciate the moment you buy them. You buy a car secondhand immediately. Some products, they appreciate in value, but what happens is that the higher the price, the more they sought after, the higher the appreciation. So if you think about like certain cars, same thing. You know that you're never going to lose money on certain cars, and the higher the price, the more sought after they are, the higher they're going to appreciate. And that's based on supply and demand. So there's very few brands that have managed to get that right, but there are a few, and some of the luxury handbag markets work like that, where similarly. So, but it's interesting to me to understand how guys are throttling the market in order to control the market, make the margin that they make, obviously, and make it exclusive to get in, because it creates a sense of scarcity. And there's definitely that baked into our genes around, there's not enough food, there's not enough Porsches, how much will I pay for it? It's the same thing.
It's interesting because if you try to link that back to this idea of like success, so these guys obviously are successful, quote unquote, people, where they can drop, 300,000 on a deposit and not think about it for, a year, 2 years or whatever that is, and then not know what you're actually going to wind up paying, in the end for the thing. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous, right? And so even though they're successful, quote unquote, they're still, if you change the category into this ultra premium space where the supply is controlled, it's almost like it doesn't matter how successful you are, you still have to do hoop jumping in certain places. I mean, these super yachts, as an example, like you can't buy them, dude. They take years to build, like literally years to build. And these guys are spending to buy a super yacht basically for everyone. So a super yacht is defined as any yacht that's greater than 24 meters in length. So you would spend for a 50-meter yacht, which is about 150 feet, you would spend around $100 million on it. And then every year, you're going to spend an additional 10% on operational costs on average. So that's another. And then there's the crew, then there's tips, then there's all the other stuff, But the same thing for them. It's this, like you're now a billionaire spending dollars on a super high premium $100 million, and yet you're also courting the brokers going, hey man,
loving them.
So what do you think makes someone successful? Hey, well,
I know that we had this conversation probably, I don't know, 6-8 months ago. There were a couple things that was obvious to me in terms of the commonalities between my clients that I feel were successful becoming more and more obvious to me on a more regular basis. And it's not, again, there's never a silver bullet. It's not if you do this, you're going to be successful ever. Like that would be the worst advice in the world. But the more I see it, I would say that people underestimate the power of their network. And their network is everything from school to university and college, their first job, the sports team they played for after school, where they drink and have whiskey with, the running crew, like their network. Okay. People underestimate how important it is to start thinking about their network very early on in life. And I'm not talking like give your kids the tools to go, we're going to put you in the right place. Like you need to learn to meet the right people in the right environments. And it's partly because, the right network will yield results for you in terms of opportunities. But also what's important is, and this goes back to the Porsche piece, is directly after that, I went to shop for motorbikes. There were a couple of motorbikes that came out of a private collector's collection, and it's my dream bikes, and you can never find them. And all of a sudden, there were like 8 of them on one floor. It was like this thing. And I went looking at this, and I'm like, oh, R500,000 or 800 grand for a bike. Yeesh, that's expensive. Like that's a lot of money for a bike. But I'm standing next to a guy who just dropped, I don't know, 3 or 4 million rand on the last Porsche, and he's going, it's a set of mags. It's like, it's not, proportionately, this isn't a big investment. But the reason I'm saying that the network's important is that if your network is talking in super yachts and Porsches and private jets, your perception of money changes, your ability to charge more or confidence to charge more, because that becomes your norm, changes, and people become more successful. So it's partly the value of the network, but also the quality of the network. And I'm not talking about like, do you have good friends, since high school, whatever that looks like. I'm talking about from a business perspective, the guys that I've seen that have been successful have started building their business at the very least through their network very, very often. So I think it's one of the sort of the main pillars of success if you look around. And obviously, the more successful you get, hopefully the better your network becomes, and then it's self-fulfilling. But that departure point of who do you phone to get the first sale, the first referral, the first intro, that's often the most important, like, first step. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I did all. So South Africa is a relatively small business net community, I would say. Especially the high net worth, successful ones, the guys dropping up. I mean, everybody knows you probably, or at least there's like 1 degree of separation away. And when I was there, same thing with the podcast and that kind of stuff. And then obviously when I moved to the States, I lost all my network, right? So if I wanted to get a meeting with a potential customer, I just pick up the phone and tell them who I was. But then I came over here, and then it's a big, much much bigger market, and obviously I didn't know anyone apart from a few authors and stuff like that. And then I remember that story I was telling you about how I used my podcast, the Map Round Show, to build that network. So I sent an email to 1,000 startups in California who had raised $1 million or more in the preceding 12 months. Basically said, hey, come onto the show. The show's had New York Times bestselling authors, blah, 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 blah. Come onto the show for a free interview, sent them the calendar link, went to bed, woke up the next morning, had 190 booked interviews and spent the next 2 months podcasting, which was hard work. But as a consequence of that, I started to learn in that network of startups what were the commonalities and pain points around it. Most of the time it was about raising money. Some of those guys actually said, well, can you help me raise money? I'm like, oh shit, I don't have a network of venture capitalists. So what do? Send the same email to to venture capitalists, same result, and so now I've got supply and demand covered in terms of a niche that's looking to do business together, and I'm sitting in the middle. So then in those same conversations, to your point around your perception of money changing, it started to change, because obviously if you're thinking about a South African rand versus a dollar, it's 20 to 1. It's 20 rand to $1. So, do the math on that. But the numbers here were like, well, it's 100 million, $350 million, $10 million, and so your whole perception of money starts changing. But within that network, that's how I started to grow my business. And along with that, it started to become a more and more powerful thing. In other words, if I wanted to do business with someone, I'd phone event, like I did this the other day. So one of the things we're looking to do as a business is actually move into the private equity, venture capital, capital market space. And because there's so much leverage there, like when money moves, you take a point of the money. So in other words, we've got a client here asking us to raise $100 million. I mean, the numbers like that he's throwing around, it's like fucking next level, dude. Like, it's like we're gonna raise 500 million, then we're gonna raise a billion, and I'm the guy that's taking a point off that. And so, yeah, it's absolutely true. But, the network is everything. It's literally everything. Like that's actually what we do as a team in reality is help B2B, well, businesses that are looking to unlock a network of high net worth accredited investors, or you have a company that's looking to raise $50 million and is looking to open up a network of private equity firms or investment banks or whatever. And so I see that same thing playing out here. So that's absolutely true. I mean, if you don't have a network, it's much, much harder to scale
Much
anything
harder.
really.
Yeah, not
Yeah.
impossible, and it is harder. There's definitely examples of guys that are huge introverts, don't want to be, front and center, small private, family and friend network, still build big businesses. Like you absolutely can do it. But I find that getting out of the gates, it helps to have like that background of a meaningful, the right meaningful network for what you're trying to do. If that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
It's the
I
right
find
niche.
that. So I think that's probably part one. I then also like it's interesting. I've got a client in just outside Cape Town, and he's doing this exercise regime called the 75 Hard. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, so
No.
I'd never heard of it, but then all of a sudden, something, it's the auto articulation system. You hear something, and suddenly you hear it everywhere. Two other people I know are now suddenly doing the same thing, and no one knows each other. And fundamentally, what it is it's a 75-day challenge. You've got to do 2 sets of exercise a day at 45 minutes per set. One of them has to be outdoors. So it could be like a 45-minute walk and then 45-minute gym or whatever it is. You've got to drink a gallon of water. It's about 3.5 liters of water a day. You've got to have a diet that you stick to. There's no alcohol. You've got to read like 10 or 20 minutes of self-help books, like nonfiction a day. And you've got to take a photo of your body as a proof point every single day for 75 days for the duration. If you stop or miss any of those things, you start again. Okay. So a lot of this has got to do with like the mental ability to commit to doing this. But what's really interesting to me is that the one particular client in Cape Town, he made a hire last year, and he's like, this guy is unbelievable. He's a rock star in our business. He's doing all the right stuff. He's got the right attitude, and he's like a go getting guy. So my client's doing the 75 hard, but it turns out the guy that he hired is also doing the 75 hard without them each knowing it. But it also speaks to the fact that there's this ability to commit to something quite difficult. Go drink 3.5 liters of water a day every day and don't miss it. Like that alone, like, a liter, 3.5 a day. I don't know if I could do that and exercise twice a day. So, but the point being is, so it's commitment, it's tolerating pain, and it's the consistency. And if I look at the guys that have built big businesses, there's never been a point in their lives where they haven't dealt with immense amounts of stress and pain. Like there's periods in their life where it's great, but probably more often than not, it's tough, and sometimes very tough. But that ability to endure the pain and push through, and then surround themselves with that network of people that are similarly, wired, those things tend to grow big businesses, or those people. So
Yeah.
there's also this, I don't know, a personality trait of guys that can endure like long distance runners or do 75 hards, or like just tolerate pain and then consistently tolerate pain, physical pain. They can translate that into their business, and they can deal with a lot more. A lot of people just aren't hard enough or aren't strong enough. Like they give up too easily. And you'll find that what happens is that a lot of businesses plateau, because to take it from that level to the next level requires a huge amount more consistency and more pain. And guys just aren't built for it. So part of it
Yeah.
is that it's a conditioning.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I would agree. I mean, so my wife bought me an ice bath for Christmas, and then I was like, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an ice bath every day for a year. And for the same reason, like mental toughness, resilience, and things like that. I mean, I'm not going to sign up for 75 hard. But it was one small thing that I know it protects my time, which is my most valuable asset. And then also can still, help me generate that same kind of mental grit or toughness or resilience, what
Mm.
have you. And so I was on like day 23 or something like that. And then we moved house. You know what I mean? And now what? Like now you literally can't do it. Like something gets in
Yeah.
the way. So yes, maybe I can go back to it like every day, every day, every day. But I find like these challenges with like 75 hard for me personally, that like I'm never going to sign up for that shit. Like also there's all these like sort of man destination weekend
Mm-hmm.
things where they like
Yeah.
put you in like a dormitory with 50 other men to talk about your emotional drama and baggage. It's like, I'm not fucking doing that. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't appeal to me. But it's like this warrior spirit. Or
Yes.
you
Yes.
fly down to the Gulf Coast here in the States, and then for 3 days they put you through like a Navy SEAL training type thing. You know what I mean? I would probably do that before I would do 75 hard,
Right.
just because of the stage of my life. You know what I mean? Like if I was 26 and I had all the time in the world, no wife, no kids, or whatever, 75 hard makes sense, right? But you with a baby, like, are you going to do 75 hard
No,
just
sure.
because you want to be mentally tough? Or are you just going to choose every day to persevere against something that sucks, And oftentimes, well, that's uncertain. And oftentimes I find like it's just the choice is what's important rather than the behavior around that. So like in other words, if you just keep choosing to move forward in that direction,
Mm.
and it's actually something that I learned through conversations with when I was doing my book, Secrets of Fail. So I interviewed like 150 CEOs that are running companies of $1 billion in aggregates or more. And it was the same thing for like so many like fuck ups, basically, like products that never saw the light of day, board, board interventions trying to fire the CEO, like all sorts of things. And every time they became successful, like their goal became a thing. And the overwhelming sort of lesson there was just like you have to just keep choosing every day to go through the shit. You have to go through the
Mm.
fire to get through to the other side. And what I think is a powerful idea as it relates to this topic of what it takes to be successful, if you just persevere like every single day, no matter how hard it gets, and you just get up in the morning at 5, like, or 4:30 in the morning, like what I do, just to get your day going, to manage your life, health, your family, all that stuff. Eventually, if you just don't quit, you get there. If you
Mm.
think about that, like if you just don't quit, you will get there.
Yeah.
And yes, there's uncertainty. Yes, there's cash flow crunches. Yes, there's all sorts of shit that you have to deal with, health problems, this and that, moving house, whatever. But if you just continue to choose to go that way, and you burn the ships and you don't choose to look backwards, then you will eventually get there. Like if my goal is to sell a business for $10 million, like if I just continue to do that, no matter what, and just take the shit every day, and I stay hard like David Goggins, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And then you will get there. Like it's just, and this is what people don't understand. It's like, well, how did someone become a billionaire? Yes, it was through their network. Yes, it was, through who knows what and timing and who knows. But they became super high net worth individuals because they just persevered and continued to get there. Like you see
Mm.
the same story, like, translates all sorts of industries, all sorts of people, white, black, Indian, colored, whatever.
Mm.
And so it's a choice. And that's why I keep coming back to you, because I think like choice is your ultimate power. If you just choose to go there and you stay there, then, you'll get there. Same thing with 75 hard, by the way. If you just choose to get, it's the
Well,
same idea.
well, I think what's interesting to me is that choose consistency. Like that's actually the choice here. So like the fact that you miss one day because you move, okay, but you'll do it again in 2 days' time, and then you'll have a run of 2 weeks, and then you'll take a day off, and then your kid will be sick, and you'll miss it, and take a day off, and then you'll do another for 3 weeks, and but that's still consistent. The fact that you miss a day every month is actually not bad. In fact, it's probably quite good to give your body a bit of a rest, right? But it's interesting because I took off a year of exercise last year when my wife had the baby. Right? We had a baby, and mostly because I didn't feel like it, and secondly, I wasn't really sleeping, and just life gets in the way, and took it off. One of the goals for this year, one of my sort of strategic pillars was to get stronger. And for the first month, wife was like, "When are you starting to gym? When are you going to go to run again?" And I was like, "Oh, it'll come, okay." And then I went for one run, and I realized, oh, in my mind, I could still run 10, 15 Ks, no problem in my mind, because it was a year ago. But my body went, is it? Like, no chance, okay? And that was quite a big wake-up call for me. So then started doing the kettlebells at home. I've been consistent probably 4 or 5 nights a week, or 4 or 5 nights a week doing it at home. And I've been running, went for a run this morning, went for a run on Sunday. And it's not about, for me, it's not about the am I doing more reps? Am I pushing more weights? Am I going further? Am I going faster? It's, did I get up this morning at 5 a.m., meet my mate and go for a run? Yes. Did I do 5 or 6 Ks? I don't care. I did it. Okay. And I'll do it again on Friday, and I'll do it again on Sunday, and whatever that is. And same with last night. I did some kettlebells. It wasn't around the fact that I did more reps or did it faster or bigger weights. At 7 p.m. last night, I went to the back room, picked up the thing, broke a sweat. I'm happy. And if you just keep doing that, you will automatically get faster, stronger, quicker, whatever those things are. But it's around that consistency. And I think business is exactly the same thing. It's get up and send the emails, make the calls, have the hard conversations, chase the cash. And if you just do that consistently, and you're active at doing that, there's an analogy of late that I've been using a lot of, is that I see a lot of businesses, they go through these periods of aggressive sales and marketing. Then the work comes, then they back off the sales and marketing. Then the work finishes and they realize, oh, cash flow shit, back to sales and marketing. And they just keep doing this up and down, right? And I always go like, you guys are pedal to the metal and then off, and pedal to the metal and off. Like, you've got to keep this thing in second gear. Just keep it always on, moving forward. It's not about how fast you're going. Just, are you applying petrol to sales and marketing all the time? Yeah. And then the same with your people management, same with the quality of the product. Like, you don't have to be flying on everything all the time. Second gear all the time across the business consistently will get you there, probably in a much better health than the guys that are flooring it and then backing off all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm using an analogy like, you've got to keep your foot down.
Yeah, well, it's like what you're describing as the tortoise in the hare, right? The tortoise just keeps going slowly every day, and the hare's busy running and sticking around, and eventually loses. Like, funny thing, I actually have like pushed into my kids' heads is this idea of like, go slow, look like a pro. So like they start, as they grow older, they start taking risks or more risks. So if I bought Frank a quad bike, motorbike, and so I just for them, listen, if you try and go fast like this, you're gonna come off and it's gonna hurt, right? Or you can go slow, learn about how to approach this hill or this track, and just go slow and look like a pro. And then then I'll go slow, and they go, look like a pro, Dad, and then off they go.
And then they will gain confidence and get faster and get better at it, and then bigger hills and faster hills, right? Yeah. But I agree with that, and it's funny because I don't think we're taught that. Maybe they are today, but we certainly weren't taught that at school. Like, this kind of applied knowledge to the way in which we live and act in the world is not something we're actually taught.
It takes 15 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's the same 100%. Idea. I mean, and I think you are right. I mean, the youngsters today, I feel, they are entitled. They believe that because everything's always been easy for them or gifted to them on a plate, access to information, the internet, social media, blah blah blah, and so it does create this sort of perception of, well, I'm entitled to be wealthy. I mean, if you read the headlines about startups in the US, go to TechCrunch and look at news. And it's like, blah, blah, startup raises, X amount of million, and they don't have any customers. They've never made any revenue. It's like, and so it creates, again, this perception, right, that it's easy.
Easy.
And so in reality, though, of course, the truth is very different to that, So it's not like you're going to sell your
Mm.
business in 6 months, as a startup and then move to the south of France on those super yachts doing Bolivian cocaine with a bunch of Russian supermodels. Life is not like that.
No,
So yeah,
very rarely, very rarely.
no,
And I think what's interesting about that as well is that, and maybe this is just age speaking, is that you reach a point in your life where you realize, you actually don't, I wouldn't want that. Um,
no,
like I'd be quite happy to go for like rent a yacht for a week with my mates all day. Happy to do that. Do I want to own a yacht? Like, and I get the fact that at that point someone else is managing it for you. It's not your headache, but still, it's like the PT of dealing with multiple properties and yachts and just the complexity around that. It feels like work to me. Like you
mm,
want sort of less stuff, not more stuff, and certainly not stuff that's going to require more staff necessarily.
yeah.
Um, so
But this
yeah,
is
I suppose maybe perception is different. I suppose at that point you do have management in your life dealing with it, but still,
yeah.
it's when you're 20, that's what you aspire to. I don't think that's something I would definitely at 50 not want for sure.
Yeah. But this is why scale is also, if you think about success, people is like, well, it's the size of your business, you know. And I've had what I thought was a big business. We were, 70 odd people. And I woke up one day going, this sucks ass. I hate this business. Like, I hate it. Like this, I'm dealing with people stuff all the time. And my days are not what I imagined them to be. So I have this new rule which I created as a consequence of that learning or
Is
experience.
this separate from the go slow, look like a pro?
Yeah. This one is
Another
it's
rule.
called the team lunch rule. So if I can't have everyone at my house over for lunch that works with me in the business, there's too many people in it. And so when I think about that constraints, and I love constraints because it makes you think creatively. Well, how can I have
Yeah,
a bigger business with
yeah.
fewer people? And if I mean, because that's the dream, right? Is to have a big business with a very small team.
Mm,
And so that forces you to think strategically about, like, well, how do we reach a certain level of scale, and how much scale is enough? Is it $1 million of profit or revenue? I don't know. But yeah, it's scale is not necessarily always a good thing. Like you said, there's only certain amounts of personality types or people that can run a big
and
business.
build
Elon
it
Musk is one of those. Jeff Bezos is another one, and so on and so on and so on. So not everyone can do that successfully.
completely. I want to ask a question. Have you ever read anything that speaks to what is enough? Like I've read lots of books of like psychology of money and the algebra of wealth and those kinds of how you think about money and wealth. But none of them really give you a this is how you should do it. Like this is enough. And we spoke about like the rule of 300 as a mechanism or a formula to work out how much money you need to stop working and not touch your capital, maintain your lifestyle. But those numbers often feel too big for most people. I'm curious to know, have you ever come across anything where it goes like, if you had to run a workshop for people to go, this is how you're going to define what enough looks like for you. This is the way you would do that. Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, but I have asked that question to a number of quote unquote successful entrepreneurs over the years. And the answers are so varied. It's such a difficult thing to put your finger on.
Mm,
And there's not necessarily any rule. I mean, there's ideas around how much is enough in terms of like, well, how would you calculate that? Like your rule of 300. Like I was talking to a friend of mine in Cape Town on Sunday. So he runs a business that's worth probably around 10 mil, and but he's got his whole family in there. Like he's got his brother in there, his mother's in there. Like it's like if it was a definition of a family business, that would be it.
right. Yeah.
But obviously he's running it, and then the others are like not that adding that much value. So I said to him, well, how much is enough for you? So he's like, well, I have a partner, so I only get half that. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then, if you think about the fact that he's in reality supporting his mom, he's supporting his brother, he's supporting his own family. If you add those things in, that changes his number for like how much is enough. So
Yeah.
for him, I almost think like he should never sell it because, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because those outgoings are just going to continue to be there for the rest of time. But I was explaining to him, like, if you sell your business for 10%, and you put 4% interest on that, you're going to make 400,000 on that, and I'm just talking in dollars now.
Yep.
So
Yep.
can you live in 400,000? Then that 10 mil would be enough. Where I think the rails come off is where you think that 1 billion is enough, right? Or 100 million is enough. It's like $100 million, dude. That is a shit ton of money. Do you know what I mean? Like, but then, but to get there, like it's such a rare thing to get there. You know what I mean? Like you almost make your own luck in that sense. Like
Yep.
maybe you didn't even have that number in mind, but then somehow the universe manifested that for you. So I don't know. It's a very nuanced and subjective answer to that.
So Matt, I don't know whether you check your mails or not. I know you got a million email addresses. Like I type Matt Brown, and it's like all the businesses that you've been involved in, past and present. I never know which is the right email address. So check them all. But I sent it to one of them. I'm sad Richard's not on the call here because he responded to me. But I'm planning this little snowboard trip in February, March next year to Europe, which I was inviting you to. Initially, I was going to do
it.
You didn't get it?
No, I did. The Selfish tour?
The Selfish tour with 3 L's, right?
Yeah.
But the reason why it's like selfish for me is because I was going to make it a work thing and I was going to facilitate. And part of the facilitation was defining your number. That's what I wanted to try and get people to get their heads around, right? But then actually, my psychologist was like, why are you making this a work thing? Like, don't you just want to go and like have a holiday? Like, don't you deserve a holiday? And I was like, yeah, actually, that's what I want. I want to go with like a bunch of mates and talk shit. And if business is the conversation, cool, but there's no requirement from me. So like, that's what that was, right? But it was interesting because when I was doing research around defining a number, as you say, there's so many different frameworks and ways of thinking about it. But it's actually, if you put 10 guys in a room, obviously you get different answers for each of them. But even the way you get them to that answer would be different based on their business, their thinking, their upbringing, where they are in their lives, how many kids they got, whether they have a coke habit or don't. Like all these things change the perception. So I found it difficult that there's no single way of going, okay, let me help you figure out how to get to your number. And I'm looking for it partly to solve my own like problems, but as a value add, because nobody's been able to answer this question for me. And I'd love to be able to take this to my client base and go, cool, here's the spreadsheet, plug it in, you're good to go. That's what you got to go hit. And then you're golden. And then like check out, if that's what you want. I'm looking for that. I'm looking for that kind of solution. So weirdly enough, anyone listening to this has got any kind of solutions, drop a DM, right? Put a comment in the YouTubes.
But why does it matter so much to you? Like, what's the driver behind that?
Because, well, partly because I feel like I've been working for 30 years at pace. And I don't want to stop working, but I want to definitely slow that pace down. Specifically now that I got 2 young kids. And like this morning, I was standing in the parking lot looking at the beautiful sunrise at 5:30 this morning. And I realized I don't see enough of those. Like it's either up and kids and work and in the office. And, so I miss sunrise and sunsets and I want more of that. So in order for me to be comfortable to go, I'm going to sacrifice revenue to go and do that. I need to know that for the next 50 years of my life, because maybe I'll live to 100, I will be financially okay. And it's not a science, like it's not a number. I get that. But within the nearest, I don't know, $500,000, $1 million ballpark of cash, what's the right number for me? So I'm trying to solve that for myself. And it's something that I don't know what the right number is.
Yeah.
But partly because the biggest fear is that I hit 70 and run out of cash. Like that freaks me out. Like that's a fear of mine.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. So he actually had to leave his business because he couldn't get the thing to work. But I, on the other hand, was like, one of my clients actually wants to buy us. So I put a number on the table for him. I'm like, well, dude, we're like not even 2 years old. And so we've got a lot of time in mind, you know what I mean, in terms of like where we want to go. But I said to him, well, if it was $2.5 million, that in America, like just would never be enough. You know what I mean? Like that's a house, but $2.5 million in South Africa, that's like a 50 million rand ticket there,
Yeah.
even more than that. It's like 60, 70 mil. That's like you then you can live however you want. Like you've got, help at home. You can live in Camps Bay. You can drive any car you want. You know what I mean? You give that money to Investec, other people manage it, and you just live in the dream, dude.
Mm.
And so it's quite romantic to think about it that way. You know what I mean? Like how much is enough is really about your cost of your costs, right?
Yeah.
So more than how much you make, right? So if you can reduce your costs, I suppose, over a period of
But
time.
let me ask you a question here, right? So hypothetically, you can get $2.5 for your business tomorrow, knowing that isn't enough for you to live the life you want in the States, but knowing that you could absolutely buy a small farm in Stellenbosch and live the most amazing life for the rest of your life without too much stress. Would you ever consider leaving the States and come back here for that kind of rands?
No,
Not.
no, no,
Okay.
not a
I'm
chance,
just
dude.
curious.
Yeah, not a chance. I mean, I don't know what it is, man. It's really about maybe when my kids are in college, and something's happened. I don't know. But I look at villas in Italy for sale.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because you can pick up these massive. I'll send you the Facebook group. But you can buy these. Literally, you can buy these mansions for like 100,000 euros. Like
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
cheap. And then like
Yeah. We
again, you're
shop
living
there
on
as
a wine
well.
farm in Europe, dude.
Yeah.
Like
No,
biggest
we
struggle.
shop in
You know what I mean?
Umbria and Tuscany all the time. My wife and I watch. There's a guy called the One Take Italian Tours on YouTube.
Oh,
So
really?
he's an estate agent, and he does these remarkable homes. Sometimes they're not so remarkable, but it's a one take video, 30 minute, and he walks through the property and talks about it. And it's like, take my money, take it. Where do I put the cash?
Yeah.
I can buy 10% of that with all the money I have, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's definitely the dream. It is the dream, and I suppose even in euros, it's cheap for euros, but in rands, it still becomes quite expensive.
Yeah. But that's why you've got to earn dollars, dude. I mean, it's just buying power.
Yeah,
Yes, your outgoings are like ridiculous here. Like, I mean, like legit, our lifestyle's like 20,000 man dollars. So that's like 500,000 rand a month.
yeah,
Like,
huge.
no one's spending that, dude, in South Africa. So, but the buying power of the dollar is just, you can't really,
Mm,
it's just, it's nuts. I mean, unless the dollar value goes through the floor, which I hear rumbles about, as a store of value and the world market's moving off the dollar, then, unless something systemic happens like that,
mm,
that's never going to change. So
no, I
that's why I
agree with
say
you.
like, yeah. And the other thing, like, just going back to this whole idea of like how much is enough, what makes people successful, I think is finding this balance between what challenges you and then obviously what helps you to chill. You know what I mean? And I don't think a lot of guys ever find that. Like let's say I did sell for 2.5 mil and then wind up on a farm in Stellenbosch living the dream. I'd get very frustrated with that because I'm not challenged in any way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's the reason why these guys buy these super yachts is to escape as privacy because they can't
Mm,
go anywhere. Like if they
yeah.
go to the casino in Monaco, like there's paparazzi there, there's cameras, everyone knows who they are. Um, Roman Abramovich as an example,
Yeah.
these sorts of dudes. And so they choose to escape not permanently, but for a week or maybe two
Periods.
weeks. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I think it's finding that balance. Just one story that's coming to mind for some reason. Tony Robbins, when he was like 26 and he started to get his success here in America, he was invited on a ski trip, just like you were talking about selfish, right? And these guys were way, way wealthier than him, and he was on the private jet and what have you. And so the next morning, I think they're at like Vale or something like that. And they decided to all meet at the bottom of the chairlift. So there's a two-man chairlift. So, Tony gets on with this other billionaire. So this billionaire and Tony get talking, and this billionaire says, "So how much money did you make last year?" And Tony says, "No, I made around $10 million." And he goes, "Wow, congratulations." And anyway, so he said, "You know what the problem is with that?" He said, and then when they get to the top of the chairlift, as they're getting off this billionaire says, I've made more money, right, on this chairlift than you've made in the entire year last year. Because of the passive income that he's got. You know what I mean? And so this is the same idea. Like, can you make the right investment choices to not have to work, but you could also choose to if you needed to. You know what I mean? On the things that you care about. And I think that's the ultimate freedom. Like, that for me is the ultimate success, is having the choice to choose. Again, going back to, like, what we were talking about earlier. Because if you don't have a choice in what you're trying to do in your life, like,
Yeah.
it's the
There's
ultimate
no freedom.
failure for me.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Cool. Good
All right,
bombshell.
brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Everybody else, let us know in the comments
Hmm.
what is success to you. Everyone else, will see you again soon.